Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at something pretty cool.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
We're going to be exploring the ways bird watching can actually be good for your mind, for your mental health.
That's right.
Yeah, I always thought bird watching it was like a nice, peaceful little hobby,
Hmm. Hmm.
but I've been reading this article, and it's called The Mental Health Benefits of Bird Watching, A Journey to Wellness.
Oh, very interesting.
And it's really got me thinking, this is way more than just a hobby.
Right. It really is.
So get ready to have your perceptions take flight because we're going to learn why bird watching is so much more than just, spotting a pretty bird out there.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about how being out in nature is good for you,
Right.
but this article really digs into the specifics of how bird watching can be like a secret weapon for well-being.
Yeah. And what I think is so cool about it is it's something that anybody can do.
Exactly, yeah.
You don't need any special skills. You don't need any special equipment. Just a little bit of curiosity.
Mm.
I'm curious about one thing, though. The article mentions that bird watching can help lower stress hormones.
Oh, interesting.
How did that even work?
Well, you got to think about where you typically find birds.
Okay, yeah.
Forests, parks, those kinds of
That's
places.
nature. Yeah.
Yeah, and studies have shown that when we spend time in those places, it can seriously reduce a hormone called cortisol.
Okay.
And cortisol is that key hormone that's all tied up in our stress response. They actually did a study and they found that just 20 minutes, that's it, of bird watching in a park reduced cortisol levels by like 18%.
Wow, that's a pretty big drop. So it's not just about the birds then. It's
Right.
really about the whole experience of being out in nature.
It is. It is. It's like bird watching. It kind of forces us to slow down, to really be in the moment, to engage all of our senses in the world around us.
Yeah.
It's like you're hitting the pause button on your busy, crazy, stressful life.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The article also talks about bird watching as being a kind of mindfulness.
Hmm.
And to be honest with you, I've tried those meditation apps and I have a hard time sitting still. I have a hard time clearing my mind.
Yeah.
How is bird watching different?
I think it's a more active kind of mindfulness. You're not just sitting there passively. You're really engaging your mind.
Uh-huh.
You're observing the birds. You're watching how they behave, how they interact with each other. It makes you focus. It makes you pay attention. And that really helps to quiet all those racing thoughts and worries that we all have.
Yeah, I can see that. Like if I'm really trying to identify a bird, really listening to its song, noticing how it moves,
Yeah.
it does kind of pull you into the present moment.
Exactly. Exactly. And by shifting our focus away from calm,
Hmm.
we start to feel more present, more aware. And that's really what mindfulness is all about, right? And bird watching just gives us this fun, engaging way to do it.
Yeah. It's like, maybe I should ditch the app and head to the park.
Maybe, yeah.
I have to be honest, though. I sometimes think bird watching can be a little, well, slow.
Yeah.
I'd be worried that I'd get bored easily.
That's a good point, but I think it depends how you approach it.
Okay.
If you're just sort of passively looking for birds, then yeah, you might feel a little bored.
Right, right.
But if you're really out there, trying to identify all the different kinds of birds, trying to learn their calls, trying to figure out how they behave, it can actually be a really fun challenge.
Yeah, like a mental workout.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like engaging that curiosity, those cognitive skills. And it's especially good for older adults.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the article talked about how bird watching helps to keep their minds sharp, keeps them engaged.
That makes sense.
Huh.
I mean, when you're learning new things, making all these connections, identifying patterns, it's got to be good for your brain, right?
Hmm.
But what makes bird watching such a good mental workout?
Well, let me give you an example. Let's say you're trying to identify a bird that you've never seen before.
Oh.
You're looking at its size, its shape, the colors, the markings, you're listening to how it calls. You might even grab a field guide to see how it's supposed to behave.
Right.
You're using your memory, your observation skills, you're solving a problem, and you're doing it in a way that's actually enjoyable and fun.
So it's like a puzzle then. Each bird is like its own little mystery to solve.
That's a great way to put it. And there are over 10,000 species of birds out there. So
Oh.
there's always a new challenge waiting for you.
This is definitely making bird watching sound more exciting than I thought. I do have one more question, though. You mentioned that bird watching often involves walking or hiking. How does that tie into the mental health benefits?
Well, we know that when we're physically active, it really boosts our mood. It releases those feel-good chemicals, endorphins,
Okay.
which helps reduce stress and make us feel better overall.
So it's not just about sitting on a park bench then.
No, not necessarily. A lot of bird watchers like to walk, maybe go hiking through all sorts of different habitats, looking for birds in different spots.
Yeah.
And all that movement being connected to the natural world, it really adds to the mental benefit. It's like your mind and body are working together.
Yeah, I can see that. I always feel more energized, more focused, even after like a short walk in the park.
Mm-hmm.
So adding in the observation, the discovery, like with bird watching, I feel like it would totally amplify that even more.
Yeah, it's amazing how our physical health, mental health, and emotional health, how they're all linked, right?
Right.
And bird watching seems to be a really unique way to tap into all of that.
We were talking earlier about how bird watching isn't necessarily something you do alone.
Hmm.
The article also mentions that there's a social aspect to bird watching.
Yeah, definitely.
How does that play into the mental health benefits?
Well, we're social creatures, right? We
Right.
need connection. And it really plays a huge role in how we feel mentally and emotionally.
Right.
And bird watching is such a great opportunity to meet other people who love nature, who love to explore just like
So
you.
it's not just about the birds.
Right.
It's about the people too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of people who are into bird watching, they join clubs, they go on these group outings, they even participate in citizen science projects.
Oh, wow.
And that all helps create this sense of community, like you belong.
Yeah.
And that in turn makes you feel happier, like you have a purpose, and just better overall.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I've noticed that anytime I do something where I feel like I'm part of a community, I feel more connected,
Yeah.
like more energized and just more optimistic overall.
It's powerful stuff. And bird watching is a fun and natural way to build those connections.
This is also interesting. Is like I'm seeing bird watching in this whole new way.
Mm.
It's not just a hobby. It's like this multifaceted practice
Yeah.
that's good for our minds, our bodies, even our social lives.
It's about connecting with nature, connecting with ourselves, and connecting with each other.
That's a great way to put it. Before we move on, there was one more point I wanted to touch on from the article. It said that bird watching can be a source of inspiration and even creativity.
Hmm.
How does that work? I mean, I get that birds are beautiful, but how does watching them actually turn into creative expression?
Well, I think it's about opening yourself up to all the little details, the nuances, all that unexpected beauty that surrounds us.
Yeah.
Bird watching encourages you to pay attention, to really see the world with fresh eyes.
I get what you mean. When you're focused on something like a bird, you start to notice all kinds of things that you might have missed otherwise.
Exactly. Exactly.
How the light hits their feathers, the different sounds in their songs, how gracefully they move.
And that awareness, that attention to detail, it can spill over into other parts of your life, and it can actually spark your creativity in ways you wouldn't expect. The article even mentioned that bird watching has been inspiring artists, writers, musicians, thinkers for, forever,
Right.
basically.
So it's like training your creative muscles then.
You could say that. By tuning into that beauty and wonder of nature, you just feel a sense of awe and appreciation. And that can fuel your creative expression.
This is fascinating. I kind of want to grab my binoculars and head outside right now. But before I do, let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to hear more about the science behind all of these benefits. And maybe we can look at some real-life examples of how bird watching has actually changed people's lives.
That was good.
So before the break, we were talking about how bird watching can spark creativity. It's pretty amazing to think that something as simple as watching birds could have such a big impact on us.
Yeah, it just shows how powerful nature is. It can inspire us, it can rejuvenate us. And, it also shows how connected our well-being is, like how engaging one aspect, like our creativity, can actually have these positive ripple effects on everything else.
You mentioned that bird watching can inspire all sorts of creative things, from painting to music. Are there any specific examples of artwork that were inspired by birds that come to mind?
Oh, tons. I mean, think about Audubon's bird paintings, those really famous ones.
Yeah.
All those intricate details, the way he captured all those vibrant colors.
Yeah, beautiful.
And then there's Mary Oliver's poetry.
Oh, yeah.
Her words were often inspired by nature, especially birds.
Right. Right.
And even in music, birdsong has influenced composers for centuries. I mean, some pieces even directly imitate bird calls.
That's a great point. I never thought about how birdsong might have actually shaped musical compositions. But yeah, it makes sense. I mean, birdsong is naturally melodic, right?
Mm.
And it's super complex.
Yeah. And it's interesting how those sounds can make us feel so many different emotions. Like
Yeah.
you can feel tranquil, you can feel excited.
Yeah, definitely.
And research has actually shown that listening to birdsong can physically lower our heart rate and blood pressure. Like it actually puts us into a state of relaxation.
It's like having your own personal stress reliever right outside your window.
Exactly.
I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to the birdsong in my neighborhood from now on.
I think you should. It's such a simple but effective way to experience those calming benefits of nature. The article also mentioned that birdsong can even improve sleep quality.
Really?
Yeah, especially for people who have insomnia.
I've always found the sounds of nature to be really soothing. I mean, I didn't know that they could actually help you sleep better, though. How does that work?
Well, our sleep cycle, our circadian rhythm is really influenced by light.
Okay.
And when you go bird watching, especially in the morning, you're exposed to natural sunlight. And that helps regulate that rhythm.
Interesting.
And that helps us sleep better.
So if I get up early to go bird watching, I might actually sleep better that night.
That's the idea. You're kind of aligning yourself with those natural rhythms of daylight and darkness, and it can really optimize your sleep.
That's a pretty compelling reason to set my alarm a little earlier.
Hmm.
Speaking of natural rhythms, the article talked about how bird watching can be especially helpful for people who are going through tough times, like people who are grieving or have experienced loss or trauma. Why do you think that is?
I think when we're going through those kinds of challenges, being out in nature can give us this feeling of solace, of perspective.
Hmm.
When you see how resilient birds are, how they adapt and thrive, even when things around them are changing, it can be really inspiring. Like there's still hope.
Yeah, I can see that. There's a certain timelessness to nature, right? It's like this sense that life just keeps going, even when we're struggling. And that can be really grounding.
It is. It is. And when you focus on something outside of yourself, like when you're watching birds, it gives you a break from all that internal turmoil that you're dealing with.
Right.
It gives you a chance to just step back, take a breath, and reconnect with the beauty of the world around you.
It's like hitting the reset button on your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
The article actually mentioned a woman named Sarah who found solace in bird watching after going through a divorce. Do you remember that story?
Yeah. Sarah's story really stuck with me. It's such a powerful example of how bird watching can help us heal and grow. She initially joined a bird watching group because her friend suggested it. She was hoping it would help her with her anxiety and depression. But what she found was so much more than that.
What happened?
Well, for Sarah, bird watching became the source of peace and focus. Immersing herself in nature, learning about the birds, it really helped to take her mind off her pain and helped her feel more present, more grounded in the moment.
It sounds like she found this new sense of joy, like a new purpose through her connection with the birds and nature.
She did. She really did. And that sense of connection, it extended beyond just the birds themselves. Sarah found a whole community in that bird watching group.
Yeah.
People who shared her passion, people who understood what she was going through.
That social connection is so important, especially when you're going through a tough time.
Yeah.
It reminds you that you're not alone.
Exactly. And for Sarah, it was a turning point in her life. She even started leading bird walks for beginners, sharing her love of birds with other people.
Oh, wow.
And in doing that, she found this renewed sense of confidence and purpose.
It's incredible how something as simple as bird watching can have such a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And not just on our mental health, but like on our whole lives.
It really is. It just shows the power of nature to heal us, to inspire us, and to connect us. And I think it highlights how important it is to find those activities that bring us joy, that engage our minds, and that connect us with other people.
And it seems like bird watching really does all of that.
It does. But what about people who live in cities, Are they missing out?
Do you have to be surrounded by nature to get these benefits?
Not at all. That's one of the great things about bird watching. You can enjoy it anywhere, even in the middle of a city.
Oh, wow.
Birds are really adaptable. I mean, they've learned how to live in urban environments.
So you don't need a huge forest or a nature preserve to experience the joy of bird watching.
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, you might be surprised by how many different birds you can find right in your own neighborhood.
Like what?
I mean, you've got pigeons, sparrows, finches. You might even see hawks and falcons. They've all learned to adapt to city life.
So all it takes is a little curiosity and a willingness to look up every once in a while.
Yeah, pretty much. It's about changing your perspective, opening your senses to the world around you, and realizing that nature isn't this separate thing, It's all around us, even in those unexpected places.
I love that. It's a good reminder that You don't have to go far to experience nature. It's right there in our backyards if we just take a moment to look.
And listen, don't forget to listen. In fact, a lot of bird watchers, they actually use their ears more than their eyes to identify birds.
That's right. I'm always impressed by those experienced bird watchers who can hear a bird and just know what it is right away.
Huh?
I can barely tell the difference between a robin and a blue jay.
It does take practice, but it's a skill that anyone can learn. It's all about paying attention to those little differences in the birdsong.
So how can our listeners start developing those skills?
That's a good question.
Do you need special equipment or training or what?
Well, one of the things I love about bird watching is that it's really accessible. You don't need a lot of fancy stuff to get started. Just be curious and be willing to observe.
What about those big, expensive binoculars that you always see bird watchers using?
Ah, yeah. Binoculars can definitely make things more fun. They let you see birds up close, even when they're far away, and you can really see what they're doing. But you don't have to have them, especially when you're just starting out.
That's good to know. I was starting to think that I needed to buy all this gear before I could even consider myself a bird watcher.
Not at all. The most important tools are your eyes and ears. And, you know, if you find that you're really getting into it, then you can start looking at field guides and maybe get yourself a pair of binoculars.
So no fancy equipment, no years of training, just a sense of curiosity and a willingness to observe. It really sounds like bird watching is for everyone.
It really is. And the rewards are huge.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive into bird watching. I'm feeling inspired, I'm feeling relaxed, and I'm ready to connect with nature in a whole new way.
That's great to hear. And, you know, as you go out and start your bird watching adventures, just remember to approach it with a sense of wonder and appreciation.
I will. We'll be right back after a quick break to dig into some practical tips and resources for all you beginner bird watchers out there. So stay tuned. Okay, so we're back, and I'm feeling really inspired to give bird watching a try. But before you wrap up, I was hoping you could share some, practical tips for beginners like me. Like, where do you even start?
Well, the first thing I always tell people is start small. You don't need to go on some big fancy trip to find birds. Just step outside your door and start looking around. See what's in your own backyard, in your neighborhood.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I kind of take for granted all the birds that are around me every day. I'm usually just rushing from one thing to the next, not really paying attention.
That's a lot of us, I think.
So slow down, be more observant. Got it. What else?
Think about the time of day. Early mornings and late afternoons are usually best for bird watching. Birds are more active then.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely hear more birds singing in the mornings. Anything else about timing?
Keep an eye on the weather. Birds are more likely to be out and about on, those calm, sunny days.
So basically, good weather for us is good weather for bird watching too.
Pretty much. And remember, you don't have to be an expert to enjoy this. There are tons of resources that can help you identify different birds and learn about how they behave. A field guide is a great place to start.
Yeah, I've seen those in bookstores.
Yeah,
They can be kind of overwhelming there. There are so many different birds.
I know, right?
Any tips on how to use one?
Yeah, start by focusing on the birds that are common in your area. Most field guides have a section that highlights the birds you're most likely to see in your region. Don't worry about trying to memorize everything all at once.
Right.
Just observe, take your time, and use the guide to help you learn.
That makes sense. It's about the journey, not about being an expert on day one.
Exactly. And there are some great online resources too. You've got bird identification apps, websites, things like that. They can be really helpful, especially if you're not even sure where to start.
So we've got field guides, apps, websites, lots of tools to help us out.
You mentioned binoculars earlier. When do you think a beginner should start thinking about getting those?
Binoculars are definitely a good investment. If you're really getting serious about bird watching, they can make a big difference. You can see the birds more clearly, especially if they're far away, and you can really get a good look at what they're doing.
Right, okay.
But again, you don't need them right away,
Yeah.
especially when you're just starting out.
Well, that's a relief. I was starting to feel like I needed to buy all this fancy equipment before I could even try bird watching.
Nope, not at all. The most important thing is just to get out there and have fun.
I like that. It sounds like good advice for anything you're trying to learn, really.
Yeah, definitely. It's about enjoying the process, learning as you go, and not putting too much pressure on yourself.
This has been so interesting. I feel like I've learned so much about bird watching today, and I'm really feeling that sense of wonder, like I'm ready to get out there and connect with nature. That's fantastic. And remember, bird watching isn't just a hobby. It's something that can really make your life richer in so many ways.
Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure.
And all our listeners, we hope you'll give birdwatching a try. You might be surprised by what you discover. Happy bird watching, everyone.